When Ivy discovers a sealed envelope hidden inside her late grandmother's favorite book while sorting through the library, she expects a sentimental bookmark or perhaps a pressed flower. Instead, the elegant handwriting reveals a confession that will destroy everything the Harrison family has built over 3 generations, exposing that their wealth, their status, their entire legacy was founded on the systematic theft of a business partner's invention, and that the family they've looked down upon for decades are actually the rightful heirs to the Harrison fortune. The library smelled of old leather and lemon polish. Ivy Harrison stood on the rolling ladder, reaching for a volume on the top shelf, dust motes dancing in the afternoon sunlight that streamed through the tall windows. Her grandmother had been dead for 3 days. The funeral was yesterday. Now came the tedious work of sorting through 93 years of accumulated possessions. Eleanor Harrison had been a collector. Books mostly, but also porcelain figurines, vintage jewelry, antique furniture, and family documents dating back to the 1800s. The house, a Victorian mansion on the good side of town, was stuffed with things that would need to be appraised, distributed, or donated. Ivy's father Robert had assigned her the library. "You're the reader in the family," he'd said. "You'll know what's valuable." What Ivy knew was that every book in this room had been touched by Eleanor. Her grandmother had spent hours here, reading in the leather wingback chair by the window, classical music playing softly on the old record player. This had been her sanctuary, her refuge from a family that had grown loud and mercenary over the generations. Ivy pulled down a worn copy of Pride and Prejudice. It was Eleanor's favorite. She'd read it at least once a year, always during the first week of spring. Ivy opened the cover, expecting to see her grandmother's bookplate, the elaborate Harrison family crest with its Latin motto about honor and perseverance. Instead, an envelope fell out. It was thick, cream-colored, expensive, the kind of stationery Eleanor had used for important correspondence, sealed with red wax, stamped with the family crest. On the front, in Eleanor's distinctive cursive handwriting, "For Ivy, to be read alone, after I am gone." Ivy's heart began to beat faster. She climbed down from the ladder and carried the envelope to Eleanor's reading chair, sat in the same spot her grandmother had occupied for decades. The leather was worn smooth, molded to Eleanor's shape. Why hide a letter in a book? Why not just leave it with the lawyer, with the will, with all the other official documents? Why this elaborate concealment? Ivy turned the envelope over in her hands. The wax seal was intact. No one had opened this. Whatever Eleanor had written was still secret. Still waiting to be discovered. She broke the seal. The wax crumbled like dried blood. Inside was a letter, multiple pages written in Eleanor's careful hand. The paper was heavy, substantial. This wasn't a quick note. This was something Eleanor had labored over, something important. Ivy unfolded the pages and began to read. "My dearest Ivy, if you are reading this, I am dead, and you have found what I have hidden for so long. I chose you because you are the only one in our family who still has a conscience, the only one who might do what is right, even when it destroys everything we have built." Ivy's hands started shaking. The only one with a conscience. What did that mean? What was Eleanor about to confess? "I have lived with a terrible secret for 70 years. A secret that has poisoned our family, corrupted our fortune, and destroyed lives. I should have told the truth decades ago. Should have made amends. Should have done the right thing. But I was a coward. I chose wealth and status over honesty. I chose comfort over justice. And now, at the end of my life, I can no longer bear the weight of what I've done." Ivy felt cold despite the warm afternoon. Her grandmother, proper, dignified Eleanor Harrison, had done something terrible. Something so terrible she'd hidden it for 70 years. Our family fortune, everything we have, everything we are, is built on theft, on betrayal, on the systematic destruction of a good man and his family. Your great-grandfather, James Harrison, did not invent the Harrison valve system. He stole it, and I helped him cover it up. The Harrison valve system. Ivy knew the story by heart. Every Harrison child learned it from birth. James Harrison, brilliant inventor, had revolutionized industrial manufacturing in 1953 with his patented valve system. The innovation had made him millions, had established the Harrison fortune, had built the legacy that sustained 3 generations. It was the foundation of everything, the source of the family's wealth and pride. The Harrison valve system was taught in engineering schools, featured in museums, celebrated as American ingenuity at its finest, and according to Eleanor, it was stolen. James had a business partner in the early days, the letter continued, a man named Thomas Bennett. They met in the war, became friends. After they came home, they worked together in James's garage, tinkering with designs, trying to create something revolutionary. Thomas was the engineer, the genius. James was the businessman, the marketer. They were a perfect team. Ivy had never heard of Thomas Bennett, had never heard her great-grandfather had a partner. The official family history presented James Harrison as a lone genius working in isolation. Thomas designed the valve system, spent 5 years perfecting it. James watched him work, learned the principles, understood the mechanics. They were going to patent it together. 50-50 partners. Thomas would handle production, James would handle sales. They would build an empire together. Ivy could guess what came next, could feel the betrayal building on the page. But James got greedy, saw how valuable the invention was, saw the fortune it would generate, and he decided he didn't want to share. Decided Thomas was expendable, decided to take everything for himself. The words were stark, brutal. Eleanor didn't sugarcoat or rationalize. She was confessing, not justifying. James filed the patent under his own name, used technical drawings he'd copied from Thomas's workshop, beat Thomas to the patent office by 3 days. When Thomas found out, he was devastated. He confronted James, threatened to sue, threatened to expose the theft. So James destroyed him. Ivy read that sentence 3 times. Destroyed him. What did that mean? How do you destroy someone? James had money, connections, power. Thomas had none of those things. James hired lawyers, paid off patent clerks, created false documentation showing he'd been working on the design for years before meeting Thomas. He painted Thomas as a disgruntled employee trying to steal credit. He sued Thomas for slander and theft. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. James hadn't just stolen the invention. He'd weaponized the legal system against its actual creator. Thomas fought back at first, tried to prove the valve system was his, but he was poor, couldn't afford good lawyers, couldn't afford a prolonged legal battle. James bled him dry with legal fees. Then, when Thomas was bankrupt and broken, James offered him a settlement, $5,000 and a confidentiality agreement. Thomas took it. He had no choice. He had a wife and 3 children to feed. $5,000. For an invention that would generate millions, billions over the decades. It was insulting, devastating, evil. That should have been the end of it, Eleanor wrote. Thomas signed the agreement, took the money, moved his family out of state. We never saw him again. James built his empire, made his fortune, became respected and powerful. And I married him. Ivy stopped reading, put the letter down, stared at the library walls lined with books bought with stolen money, at the furniture purchased with a fortune built on betrayal, at the life of luxury funded by destroying Thomas Bennett and his family. Everything was a lie. Everything. Ivy picked up the letter again. Her hands were still shaking, but she had to know everything. Had to read the full confession before she could decide what to do with it. I met James in 1954, Eleanor continued, a year after the patent was filed. He was already successful, already building his empire. I was 23, from a good family but not a wealthy one. James was handsome, charming and rich. I thought I'd won the lottery when he proposed. Ivy had seen wedding photos. Young Eleanor in an elaborate white gown. Young James in a crisp tuxedo. They'd looked happy, in love, perfect. I didn't know about Thomas Bennett at first. James never mentioned him, never talked about a partner or a lawsuit. He presented himself as the sole inventor, the brilliant mind behind the Harrison valve system. I believed him, everyone believed him. But 6 months after we were married, I overheard a conversation. James was in his office talking to his lawyer. They were discussing Thomas Bennett, discussing the settlement, discussing how to ensure Thomas never spoke about the real origins of the valve system. I confronted James that night, asked him who Thomas Bennett was, why he'd paid him $5,000, what the confidentiality agreement was hiding. Ivy could imagine that conversation. Young Eleanor, probably still naive, still believing in her husband's essential goodness, learning the truth, having to decide what to do with it. James told me everything, admitted he'd stolen the design, admitted he'd destroyed Thomas financially and legally. But he wasn't ashamed. He was proud. He said Thomas was too weak to capitalize on his own invention. That the design would have died in obscurity if James hadn't taken it. That he'd done the world a favor by ensuring the valve system reached its full potential. The rationalization of thieves, the excuse of every person who'd ever stolen and justified it. Ivy had heard similar arguments from corporate executives, from politicians, from anyone who benefited from someone else's loss. The strong deserve to win. The weak deserve to lose. Might makes right. I should have left him. Should have exposed him. Should have gone to Thomas Bennett and told him the truth. Should have done something, but I didn't. I was pregnant with your grandfather. I was terrified of being a divorced single mother in 1954. Terrified of losing the comfort and security James provided. So I stayed. I kept his secret. I became complicit. Complicit. Eleanor didn't flinch from the word. Didn't soften it. She'd chosen comfort over conscience. Had let injustice stand because correcting it would cost her something. For 70 years I've lived with that choice. 70 years of knowing every dollar we spent was stolen. Every piece of furniture, every vacation, every private school tuition, all of it purchased with money that should have gone to Thomas Bennett and his family. Ivy thought about her own life, the private schools, the college tuition her grandparents had paid, the trust fund that would ensure she never worried about money, all of it funded by theft, all of it tainted. I tried to find Thomas over the years, tried to see if I could make amends anonymously, but he died in 1978, heart attack at 62. He never recovered from what James did to him, never rebuilt his life. He worked as a factory supervisor until he died. Died poor and bitter and broken. Thomas Bennett had died at 62, probably from stress. Probably from the weight of watching his invention make other people rich while he struggled to survive. Probably from the injustice of it all. But Thomas left children, 3 of them, and those children had children. The Bennett family is still out there, still living, still existing in the shadow of what was stolen from them. Ivy's breath caught. The Bennett family was alive. Descendants of Thomas Bennett were somewhere in the world, probably unaware that they were the rightful heirs to a fortune worth hundreds of millions. I've kept track of them over the years, hired private investigators occasionally, made sure I knew where they were, how they were doing. It was the least I could do, though it changed nothing. The Bennetts have struggled. Thomas's oldest son, Michael, became a teacher, never made much money. His daughter, Sarah, was a nurse. His youngest son died young. Drugs, the investigator said. Probably self-medicating pain I helped create. Eleanor had watched the Bennett family struggle while the Harrisons thrived, had tracked their poverty while enjoying wealth that should have been theirs. The cruelty of it was staggering. Michael Bennett's children, your generation Ivy, they're scattered across the country. One is a social worker in Ohio. One is a mechanic in Texas. One is a waitress in Oregon. They're good people. Hard-working people. People who deserve so much more than they have. Ivy tried to imagine these cousins she'd never met. People her age working ordinary jobs, struggling with bills, unaware that they'd been robbed of a fortune before they were born. I'm telling you this because someone needs to know. Someone needs to make this right. James died 20 years ago, believing he'd gotten away with it. Your grandfather grew up wealthy, never questioning where the money came from. Your father is the same. He enjoys the fortune without examining its origins. None of them have ever felt the weight of what was stolen. But you, Ivy, you're different. You've always been different. You question things. You care about justice. You have a conscience that hasn't been corrupted by generations of wealth. That's why I'm telling you, because you might actually do something about it. Ivy set down the letter and stood up, paced the library, looked at the thousands of books, the expensive furniture, the oil paintings on the walls, all purchased with stolen money, all part of the lie. What was Eleanor asking her to do? Expose the family, destroy their reputation, give away their fortune. How could one person undo 70 years of injustice? She picked up the letter again. There were still several pages left. I have documentation, Eleanor wrote, proof of what James did. I collected it over the years, knowing that someday the truth would need to come out. In my safe deposit box at First National Bank, you'll find a folder marked Bennett Evidence. Inside are Thomas's original design drawings, letters between James and his lawyers discussing the theft, copies of the settlement agreement, financial records showing where the fortune came from, everything you need to prove the valve system was stolen. Evidence. Eleanor had gathered evidence, had been preparing for this revelation for decades, had been planning to confess even if she didn't have the courage to do it while alive. "I'm leaving you a choice, Ivy. You can destroy this letter, burn the evidence, let the lie continue, protect the family fortune and the Harrison name. No one would ever know. You could live your comfortable life and never think about Thomas Bennett or the family he left behind." That was the easy choice, the comfortable choice. Pretend she'd never found the letter, continue enjoying wealth she now knew was stolen, let the injustice stand. Or you can tell the truth, expose what James did, make restitution to the Bennett family, restore what was stolen even though it will cost you everything. You'll be reviled by your own family, you'll lose your inheritance, you'll be known as the Harrison who destroyed the Harrison legacy, but you'll be able to look at yourself in the mirror. You'll be able to live with yourself. You'll be right, even if it costs you everything. Ivy felt the weight of the choice pressing down on her. Her grandmother was dead, couldn't face the consequences of confession, couldn't bear the family's rage or the public humiliation. She'd passed that burden to Ivy, had made Ivy the arbiter of justice decades overdue. "I know I have no right to ask this of you," Eleanor concluded. "I know I should have been brave enough to do it myself, but I wasn't. I chose comfort over courage. I chose family over fairness. I chose silence over truth. And now at the end I can only hope that you'll be braver than I was, that you'll do what I should have done 70 years ago. Whatever you choose, know that I love you. Know that I'm sorry. Know that I died with this weight on my conscience and I would not wish that burden on anyone. The choice is yours now. Choose wisely. Choose bravely. Choose what you can live with. With all my regret and all my love, Grandmother Eleanor." Ivy sat in the reading chair for a long time, staring at the letter, feeling the weight of 70 years of injustice pressing against her chest. Her grandmother had just handed her an impossible choice: comfort or conscience, family or fairness, lies or truth, and Ivy had no idea what to do. If this story has touched you so far, please leave your like, share in the comments if you've ever faced an impossible moral choice, and send this to someone who understands that sometimes doing the right thing costs everything. Truth matters. Justice matters. Even when it's 70 years late. Ivy spent the rest of the afternoon in the library, reading Eleanor's letter over and over, searching for a loophole that would make the choice easier. There wasn't one. The confession was clear. The evidence was waiting. The decision was hers. She heard footsteps in the hallway, her father's voice calling her name. "Ivy, you still in there? Your mother wants to know if you're staying for dinner." Ivy quickly folded the letter and tucked it into her bag. "Yeah, I'm here, just sorting books." Robert Harrison appeared in the doorway. He was 65, distinguished, with silver hair and the kind of easy confidence that came from never questioning your place in the world. He'd grown up wealthy, had inherited control of Harrison Industries from his father, had expanded the fortune without ever wondering where it came from. "Find anything interesting?" he asked. "Just a lot of old books, first editions mostly, probably worth having appraised." "Your grandmother did love her books." Robert looked around the library with satisfaction. "This room alone is probably worth a couple $100,000. The complete Dickens collection, all those signed editions. Your grandmother had excellent taste. Excellent taste purchased with stolen money." Ivy couldn't look at her father without seeing him differently now. He wasn't evil. He wasn't cruel. He just genuinely didn't know that everything he had was built on betrayal. Should she tell him? Should she show him the letter? He was the head of the family, the CEO of Harrison Industries, the person who should probably know that the company's entire foundation was fraudulent. But Ivy knew what would happen if she told him. Robert would deny it, would insist Eleanor was confused or senile, would find a way to discredit the evidence, would circle the wagons and protect the family reputation at all costs. Men like Robert Harrison didn't admit to fundamental wrongs. They couldn't. Their entire identity was wrapped up in the family legacy. Admitting it was built on theft would destroy who they thought they were. "I'm going to keep working," Ivy said. "Tell Mom I'll grab something later." Robert nodded and left. Ivy waited until his footsteps faded, then pulled out her phone. She needed to research, needed to understand what she was dealing with before making any decisions. She started with Thomas Bennett, found his obituary from 1978. Thomas James Bennett, 62, died suddenly of a heart attack. He is survived by his wife Margaret and 3 children, Michael, Sarah, and James Jr. Mr. Bennett worked for 30 years as a supervisor at Lakeside Manufacturing. Services will be held at St. Mary's Church. No mention of the valve system. No mention of his early work as an inventor. Just a brief obituary for a man who'd lived an ordinary life after having his extraordinary invention stolen. Ivy searched for the children, found Michael Bennett first. He'd been a high school math teacher for 40 years, retired now, living in Cleveland. Sarah Bennett had been a pediatric nurse. Died 5 years ago of cancer. James Jr. The obituary mentioned him dying young. Ivy found the details. Drug overdose at 33, left behind a wife and 2 kids. The Bennett family had struggled. While the Harrisons lived in mansions and sent their children to Ivy League schools, the Bennetts had worked ordinary jobs and faced ordinary tragedies. The injustice of it was staggering. Ivy searched for the next generation. Michael Bennett's children were easy to find on social media. David Bennett, 38, social worker in Columbus. Rachel Bennett, 35, working at a community health clinic. They both had young children. Both looked happy in their photos, but also tired. The kind of tired that comes from working hard and never quite getting ahead. James Jr.'s children had been young when he died. His daughter Madison was 30 now, working as a waitress in Portland according to her Facebook profile. His son Tyler was 27, working as a mechanic in Austin. Both of them looked like they were barely getting by. These were Ivy's distant cousins. People who shared a connection to Thomas Bennett. People who'd been robbed of a fortune before they were born. People who had no idea they were supposed to be wealthy. Ivy thought about her own life. She was 32, had a master's degree from Yale that her grandparents had paid for, worked as a curator at an art museum, a job that paid modestly, but which she could afford because of her trust fund. She lived in a nice apartment in a good neighborhood, had money for travel and nice clothes, and the kind of security most people never had. All of it funded by Thomas Bennett's stolen invention. She thought about Rachel Bennett working at a community clinic, probably dealing with uninsured patients and bureaucratic nightmares and never making enough money. She thought about Madison Bennett waiting tables, about Tyler Bennett working as a mechanic, about all the struggles they'd faced that wealth could have prevented. The Bennetts deserved better. They'd always deserved better. And the only person who could give it to them now was Ivy. But what did that look like? What did restitution mean? Did she confess publicly? Did she contact the Bennetts directly? Did she involve lawyers? And what would happen to her own family, to Harrison Industries, to the fortune that supported dozens of Harrison descendants? Ivy pulled up the company's financial records, publicly available since Harrison Industries was traded on the stock exchange. The company was worth approximately $800 million. The Harrison family fortune, when you included real estate and investments and trusts, was probably over $1 billion. All of it traced back to the valve system, the invention that Thomas Bennett had created and James Harrison had stolen. If Ivy exposed the truth, the Bennetts could sue, could claim ownership of the original patent, could argue they were entitled to decades of profits, could potentially take everything. The Harrison family would be destroyed. The company might be dismantled. Ivy's father, her uncle, her cousins, all of them would lose their wealth, their status, their identity, and Ivy would be the one who did it to them. She closed her eyes and tried to think clearly. What was the right thing to do? Eleanor had presented it as a binary choice, silence or truth, but maybe there was a middle ground. Maybe Ivy could make restitution without destroying her family publicly. Maybe she could find the Bennetts and offer them money without explaining why. Maybe she could do some good without sacrificing everything. But that felt like another lie, another way of hiding the truth. The Bennetts deserved to know what had been stolen from them, deserved to understand why they'd struggled while the Harrisons thrived, deserved the opportunity to decide what justice looked like. Ivy spent the evening researching patent law, theft of intellectual property, and the statute of limitations for civil cases. What she found was complicated. The original patent would have expired by now. Patents only lasted 20 years. But the theft had created ongoing harm. The company built on that patent was still generating profits. The Bennetts had been deprived of decades of income. A good lawyer could argue the Bennetts deserved compensation, maybe not the entire company, but a significant portion of the fortune, enough to change their lives, enough to provide some measure of justice. But pursuing that would mean exposing what James Harrison had done, would mean destroying the family's reputation, would mean admitting that every Harrison for 3 generations had been living on stolen money. Ivy's phone rang. Her brother Andrew. She let it go to voicemail. Listened to the message. "Hey, Dad says you're still sorting through Grandma's stuff. Just FYI, I want first dibs on any cash or jewelry. Text me if you find anything good." Andrew, her younger brother. 30 years old and still acting like money grew on trees. He'd never worked a real job, had been supported by the family fortune his entire life, had no concept that some people struggled. He was exactly the kind of Harrison Eleanor had been talking about, someone who'd been corrupted by generations of unearned wealth. If Ivy exposed the truth, Andrew would hate her, would probably never speak to her again, would see her as the enemy who destroyed his comfortable life. Could Ivy live with that? Could she sacrifice her relationship with her family for the sake of people she'd never met? She thought about Eleanor's words. "You're the only one who still has a conscience." Maybe that was true. Maybe Ivy was the only Harrison who could bear the weight of truth, who could sacrifice comfort for justice. Or maybe she was just the one Eleanor had manipulated into carrying this burden. Maybe this was Eleanor's final act of control, making Ivy the villain or the hero, forcing her to make the choice Eleanor hadn't been brave enough to make herself. Ivy looked at the letter again, at Eleanor's careful handwriting, at the confession of a woman who'd lived 70 years with unbearable guilt. Did Ivy want that for herself? Did she want to spend the rest of her life knowing the truth and hiding it? Did she want to become like Eleanor, complicit, comfortable, and corroded by secrets? No, she didn't. Whatever the cost, Ivy couldn't live that way. She made her decision. The next morning, Ivy drove to First National Bank. She had the key to Eleanor's safe deposit box. It had been in with the will, labeled Family Documents. The executor had given it to Ivy when she'd been assigned to sort through the library. The bank manager led her to the vault. The safe deposit box was large, one of the biggest in the bank. Inside was a thick folder labeled Bennett Evidence in Eleanor's handwriting. Ivy took the folder to a private viewing room and opened it. Inside were dozens of documents, carefully organized and annotated. Eleanor had been meticulous in her record-keeping. There were Thomas Bennett's original design drawings for the valve system, dated 1948 through 1952, showing the evolution of the design over years of work. The drawings were labeled in Thomas's handwriting, signed and dated. They predated James Harrison's patent filing by 5 years. There were letters between James and his lawyer discussing strategy for the patent filing. One letter was particularly damning. "Thomas has no idea I've copied his drawings. By the time he realizes what's happened, the patent will be filed and legally defensible. He's too poor to fight us in court." There were financial records showing James had paid off a patent clerk, bank transfers and handwritten receipts from 1953, clear evidence of corruption. There was the settlement agreement Thomas had signed, $5,000 in exchange for silence. The confidentiality clause was brutal. Thomas agreed never to claim credit for the valve system, never to discuss his work with James, never to contest the patent in any way. Breaking the agreement would result in immediate legal action and financial penalties Thomas could never afford. There were private investigator reports documenting the Bennett family over the decades, where they lived, what they did for work, their financial struggles. Eleanor had been watching them for years, tracking the ongoing harm caused by the original theft, and there was a notarized statement from Eleanor herself, dated 6 months before her death, a full confession, explaining everything she'd witnessed, everything she'd helped cover up, everything she'd lived with for 70 years. It was signed and witnessed by her attorney, who'd clearly been instructed to keep it confidential until Eleanor's death. This wasn't just a grandmother's rambling letter. This was a comprehensive legal case, evidence that could stand up in court, proof that would be nearly impossible to deny or dismiss. Eleanor had prepared everything, had done the hard work of documentation, had built the case against her own family, had left Ivy with something more than a moral dilemma. She'd left her with the tools to pursue actual justice. Ivy photographed every document, uploaded them to a secure cloud storage, made sure the evidence couldn't be destroyed or suppressed. Then she put the original documents back in the safe deposit box and left the bank. She needed advice, needed to talk to someone who could help her think through the implications, someone who wasn't family, someone who could be objective. She called her best friend Marcus. They'd gone to college together, had stayed close despite living in different cities. Marcus was a civil rights lawyer. If anyone could help Ivy navigate this situation, it was him. They met at a coffee shop far from the Harrison neighborhood, somewhere Ivy wouldn't run into family, somewhere she could speak freely. "You look terrible," Marcus said when he saw her. "What's going on?" "I found something. Something that's going to destroy my family." She told him everything. About the letter, about Thomas Bennett, about the stolen valve system, about the evidence, about the choice Eleanor had left her. Marcus listened without interrupting. When Ivy finished, he sat back and let out a long breath. "Jesus, that's big. That's bigger than big. What do I do? What do you want to do? I want to make it right, but I don't know how, and I don't want to destroy innocent people in the process." "Ivy, there's no version of making this right that doesn't hurt someone. Either you protect your family and let the injustice continue, or you pursue justice and your family suffers the consequences. There's no middle ground here. What if I just contact the Bennetts privately, offer them money, make restitution without exposing the whole story?" Marcus shook his head. "They'd want to know why. Why would a wealthy family suddenly decide to give millions of dollars to strangers? They'd investigate. They'd find out about the connection to Thomas Bennett. The truth would come out anyway, but in a messy, uncontrolled way. So, I have to decide. Public confession or continued silence? Yeah. And Ivy, if you decide to go public, you need to be prepared. Your family will turn on you. Your father will probably disown you. You'll lose your inheritance, your trust fund, your place in the family. They'll paint you as crazy or vindictive. They'll try to discredit the evidence. It'll be brutal, but it's the right thing to do. Maybe, or maybe it's just the thing that salves your conscience at the expense of your entire life." Ivy looked at her friend. "You think I should stay silent? I think you should think very carefully about what you're sacrificing and what you're gaining. Justice for the Bennetts is important, but is it worth losing everything? Is it worth destroying your family? Is it worth making yourself the villain in your own life story? Eleanor lived with the guilt for 70 years. It destroyed her. I don't want that. Then don't make the same choice she made. But Ivy, there's a difference between making amends and self-destruction. You can do good without sacrificing everything. How? Use your inheritance to help the Bennetts. Set up a foundation. Donate anonymously. Support causes they care about. You can make their lives better without destroying your own." It was tempting, so tempting, to take the middle path, to do some good without facing the full consequences of the truth. But it felt wrong, felt like another way of hiding. Another generation of Harrisons benefiting from theft, while offering the scraps of charity to the people they'd wronged. "The Bennetts deserve to know," Ivy said. "They deserve to understand why they struggled, why their family was poor while mine was rich. They deserve the choice to pursue justice if they want to. And if they do pursue it, if they sue, if they take everything, then maybe that's what should happen. Maybe the Harrison fortune never belonged to us in the first place." Marcus studied her face. "You're really going to do this? You're really going to blow up your entire life?" "I don't know. I'm still deciding, but leaning toward yes." "Then let me help. Let me connect you with lawyers who specialize in intellectual property theft. Let me help you build the case. If you're going to do this, let's do it right." Ivy felt tears burning her eyes. "Thank you. I thought you'd try to talk me out of it. I think you're probably making a mistake. I think this is going to cost you more than you can imagine. But I also know you, Ivy. Know you couldn't live with yourself if you stayed silent. So if you're going to pursue this, I want to make sure you're protected." They spent the next 3 hours planning. Marcus laid out the legal strategy. They'd need to contact the Bennetts first, privately, explain the situation, show them the evidence, give them the choice of whether to pursue legal action. If the Bennetts wanted to sue, Marcus would connect them with a top intellectual property firm. The case would be complicated. The original patent had expired, but the ongoing profits from the company built on that patent were still legally actionable. The Bennetts might win a settlement, might get a substantial portion of the Harrison fortune, might get public acknowledgement that Thomas Bennett was the true inventor, and the Harrisons would be destroyed, their reputation ruined, their fortune depleted, their legacy revealed as a fraud. "One more thing," Marcus said as they were leaving. "Before you do this, talk to your father. Give him a chance to make this right voluntarily. Maybe he'll surprise you. Maybe he'll choose to do the right thing." Ivy doubted it, but Marcus was right that she should try. should give Robert Harrison one chance to be better than his grandfather, one chance to choose justice over comfort. That night, Ivy asked her father to meet her at the library, said she'd found something important while sorting through Eleanor's things. Robert arrived looking slightly annoyed. "Ivy, I'm very busy. Your mother's pressuring me to finalize the estate. Can this wait?" "No, it can't." Ivy handed him Eleanor's letter. "Read this. All of it." She watched her father's face as he read, watched confusion turn to shock, turn to anger. By the time he finished, his hands were shaking. This is insane. Mother was clearly senile, confused. This never happened. I have evidence, original design drawings, letters, financial records, a notarized confession. Dad, it's all true. James Harrison stole the valve system. Our entire fortune is built on theft." Robert set the letter down carefully, his face carefully blank. Ivy recognized that expression. It was his lawyer face, the one he wore when he was about to argue a position he didn't actually believe in. Even if this were true, which I'm not conceding, it happened 70 years ago. The statute of limitations has long expired. No one can be held legally accountable. The statute of limitations for civil damages restarts with each instance of harm. Harrison Industries still profits from the valve system every year. The Bennetts have been continuously deprived of income that should have been theirs. Dad, this is actionable. You've been talking to lawyers. Robert's voice turned cold. You're building a case against your own family. I'm trying to do the right thing. The right thing? Robert stood abruptly, his composure cracking. The right thing is to protect this family, to protect what generations of Harrisons have built. Ivy, if this gets out, we're ruined. The company will be vulnerable to lawsuits. Our reputation will be destroyed. Everything we have will be at risk. Everything we have belongs to the Bennett family. It always did. That's naive. Thomas Bennett is dead. His children are old. They've lived their entire lives without this money. They don't need it now. Why destroy our family for people who won't even appreciate it? That's not for you to decide. They deserve to know. They deserve the choice. Robert began pacing the way he did when he was working through a complex problem. How much would it cost to make this go away? If we offered the Bennetts money, substantial money, in exchange for their silence? That's what James did, paid Thomas $5,000 for silence. It didn't make it right. It just made it hidden. I'm talking millions, Ivy. Enough to change their lives. They get money they never expected. We protect the family legacy. Everyone wins. Except truth. Except justice. Except basic human decency. Don't be sanctimonious. You've benefited from this fortune your entire life. Your education, your apartment, your comfortable job at the museum, all of it funded by the very money you're now calling tainted. You don't get to act morally superior when you've been complicit for 32 years. The accusation stung because it was true. Ivy had enjoyed the benefits of theft without questioning where the money came from. But that was precisely why she had to act now. Because continuing to benefit while knowing the truth would make her exactly like Eleanor. Guilty and cowardly and corrupted by comfort. You're right, Ivy said. I've been complicit. I've benefited from theft, which is why I'm going to give up my inheritance. I'm going to step away from the Harrison fortune, and I'm going to help the Bennetts get what's rightfully theirs. Robert stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. You'd give up millions of dollars? You'd destroy your own family for what? Some abstract concept of justice? For the Bennetts. For Thomas Bennett, who died poor and broken. For his children who struggled unnecessarily. For his grandchildren who are working paycheck to paycheck while we live in mansions. Yes, Dad, for them. You're not thinking clearly. You're emotional. Give yourself time to process this. I've had 3 days. I've done research. I've talked to lawyers. I'm thinking very clearly, and I'm giving you a choice. Ivy pulled out a folder she'd prepared. Inside was a proposal, a plan for voluntary restitution. Option 1, we go public. We acknowledge what James Harrison did. We apologize to the Bennett family. We offer them a substantial settlement. I'm thinking half the company's value plus ongoing royalties. We take the hit to our reputation, but we do it honestly. We control the narrative. Robert laughed harshly. Absolutely not. That would destroy us. Option 2, we contact the Bennetts privately. We explain the situation. We offer them the same settlement, but keep it quiet. They get what they deserve. We avoid public scandal. But Ivy, they have to agree. If they want to go public, we don't fight them. And if they sue for everything, if they want the whole company, then maybe that's what should happen. Maybe the Harrison fortune never belonged to us in the first place. You've lost your mind. I'm calling Dr. Morrison, you need to see a psychiatrist. I'm not crazy, Dad, I'm just finally seeing clearly. And what I see is that our entire family is built on a lie, on theft, on the destruction of good people. I see that we've been complicit in continuing that theft for 3 generations, and I see that I have a chance to make it right, even if it costs me everything. Robert grabbed the letter and the proposal, his hands shaking with rage. I need time to think about this, to consult with lawyers, to talk to your uncle. You have 1 week. After that, I'm contacting the Bennetts directly, with or without family support. You do that and you're out. No inheritance, no trust fund, no family. You'll be dead to us. I know. I'm prepared for that. Robert left without another word. Ivy sat alone in the library, shaking from the confrontation. She'd just threatened to destroy her own family, had chosen strangers over blood, had decided that justice mattered more than love. Was she making the right choice? Or was she being self-righteous, using the Bennetts as an excuse to rebel against her family's wealth and privilege? Ivy didn't know, but she knew she couldn't stay silent, knew she couldn't live with Eleanor's guilt, knew that some things were more important than comfort. Over the next week, the Harrison family went into crisis mode. Robert called an emergency family meeting. Ivy wasn't invited, but she heard about it from her cousin Julia, who was sympathetic to Ivy's position even if she thought it was misguided. Your dad showed everyone the letter, Julia reported. Uncle Charles lost his mind, started ranting about ungrateful children and family loyalty. Your brother Andrew said you'd always been a disappointment. Your mom didn't say anything, just cried. What about you? What did you say? Julia was quiet for a moment. I said you might be right. That maybe we should at least talk to the Bennetts. Uncle Charles told me to shut up or I'd be next on the disinheritance list. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to drag you into this. You didn't. This has been coming for a long time. The family's rotten, Ivy. We all know it. We just don't want to admit it because admitting it would mean giving up our comfortable lives. The first revelation hit Ivy then. Her family knew. Maybe not the specific details about Thomas Bennett, but they knew the fortune was dirty somehow. They knew James Harrison hadn't been the saint of family mythology. They'd just chosen not to ask questions, because questions would require accountability. Are they going to try to stop me? Ivy asked. Your dad hired lawyers. They're looking for ways to suppress the evidence, claiming Eleanor was senile, arguing the confession isn't legally valid. They're preparing to fight you if you go through with this. So they've chosen. They're choosing money over morality. Were you expecting anything different? No. Ivy hadn't been, but some small part of her had hoped her father would surprise her, would choose to be better than his grandfather, would decide that truth mattered more than wealth. He'd chosen wealth, just like Eleanor had, just like every Harrison before him, which meant Ivy was on her own. She contacted Marcus. My family's not cooperating. They're preparing to fight. I need you to help me contact the Bennetts. Are you sure? Once you do this, there's no going back. I'm sure. Marcus set up a meeting with his colleague Amanda, an intellectual property lawyer with experience in historical theft cases. Amanda reviewed Eleanor's evidence and confirmed it was solid. This is one of the most well-documented cases I've seen, Amanda said. Your grandmother did excellent work. With this evidence, the Bennetts would have a very strong case. They might not get the entire company, but they'd be entitled to substantial compensation. How substantial? Conservatively, $200 million. Possibly more if we can prove ongoing damages. The Harrison fortune is built on Thomas Bennett's invention. The Bennetts are entitled to a significant portion of the profits generated over 7 decades. $200 million. It would devastate the Harrison fortune, but not destroy it completely. The family would still be wealthy, just not obscenely so. They'd have to sell assets, possibly sell the company. Their lifestyle would change dramatically, but they'd survive, which was more than Thomas Bennett had been allowed to do. How do we approach the Bennetts? Ivy asked. Carefully. We need to explain the situation without overwhelming them. They're going to be shocked, angry, possibly suspicious. We need to give them time to process and decide what they want to do. They decided to start with Michael Bennett, Thomas's oldest son. He was 78 now, retired, living in a modest house in Cleveland. If anyone could understand the historical context, it would be him. Ivy flew to Cleveland. Marcus and Amanda came with her. They sat in a rental car outside Michael Bennett's house, preparing for a conversation that would change everything. "Ready?" Marcus asked. "No. But let's do it anyway." Michael Bennett answered the door wearing a cardigan and slippers. He was tall, thin, with white hair and sharp blue eyes that studied them with curiosity. "Can I help you?" "Mr. Bennett, my name is Ivy Harrison. This is Marcus Chen and Amanda Rodriguez. We're lawyers. We'd like to talk to you about your father, Thomas Bennett." Michael's expression shifted immediately. "My father's been dead for over 40 years. What could you possibly want to talk about? May we come in? It's complicated and important." Michael hesitated, then stepped aside, led them to a small living room filled with worn furniture and family photos. "My wife passed 3 years ago," he said, noticing them looking at the photos. "It's just me now. My kids visit when they can." They sat. Ivy pulled out a folder containing copies of Eleanor's letter and some of the key evidence. "Mr. Bennett, did your father ever talk about his work as an inventor? About a valve system he designed in the 1950s? Michael's face went pale. "How do you know about that?" "Because my great-grandfather stole it. James Harrison took your father's invention, patented it under his own name, and built a fortune that should have belonged to your family." Michael sat very still. "I always suspected. My father would never talk about it. But sometimes, late at night when he'd been drinking, he'd mention a partner who betrayed him, a man named Harrison. He'd get this look in his eyes, not anger exactly, more like grief, like he was mourning something stolen." "He was. Your father designed the Harrison valve system. James Harrison copied his work, filed the patent first, and then destroyed your father when he tried to fight back." Ivy handed him Eleanor's letter, watched as he read it, his hands trembling. When he finished, tears were streaming down his face. "All these years," he whispered, "all these years I wondered. My father died bitter and poor. He worked himself to death in a factory. He never got over what happened, and I never knew why, never understood what had broken him. I'm so sorry. Your father deserved so much better." Michael looked up at Ivy. "Why are you here? Why are you telling me this now?" "Because my grandmother confessed. Because I found evidence. Because you and your family deserve to know the truth. And because you deserve restitution." Amanda stepped forward, her lawyer voice gentle but professional. "Mr. Bennett, your family has a strong legal case. The evidence Ivy's grandmother left is comprehensive. We could pursue this in court. You could be entitled to hundreds of millions of dollars in damages." Michael laughed bitterly. "Hundreds of millions. My father settled for $5,000 because he couldn't afford a legal fight. And now, 45 years after his death, you're telling me my family is owed hundreds of millions? Yes, the Harrison fortune was built on your father's invention. You and your children and grandchildren are entitled to a share of the profits generated over 7 decades. Michael stood and walked to the window, stared out at his modest neighborhood. "My son David is a social worker, makes $40,000 a year. My daughter Rachel runs a community clinic in a poor neighborhood. She works 60-hour weeks and barely scrapes by. We've all struggled our entire lives while the Harrisons lived in mansions and sent their kids to Ivy League schools. I know, it's not fair. It's never been fair." Michael turned back to them. "Why? Why is Ivy Harrison helping us? Why would you destroy your own family for strangers?" "Because it's right. Because I can't live with benefiting from theft. Because someone needs to break the cycle." "And what happens to you when this comes out? When your family finds out you betrayed them?" "They've already found out. They've disowned me. I'm giving up my inheritance. I'll probably never speak to most of them again. But that's okay. I can't be part of something built on lies anymore." Michael studied Ivy's face for a long moment. Then he said something unexpected. "No." "No?" Amanda looked confused. "Mr. Bennett, you have the right to pursue this. We can help you." I said no. "I don't want the money. I don't want to sue. I don't want any of it." Ivy felt like she'd been punched. But you deserve it. Your father deserves justice. Your family deserves compensation. My father is dead. Justice won't bring him back. And the money would destroy us just like it destroyed the Harrisons. We'd fight over it. My grandchildren would grow up entitled and spoiled. We'd become exactly what you're trying not to be." The second devastating revelation crashed over them all. Michael Bennett was refusing justice, was choosing to let the injustice stand rather than risk becoming corrupted by the same wealth that had corrupted the Harrisons. "I understand you're in shock," Marcus said. But take some time to think about this. Talk to your children. This isn't just about you, it's about your family's future. I don't need time. I know what wealth does to people. I've seen it. I've spent my whole life working with rich people's children, teaching them, watching them struggle with privilege and entitlement. I don't want that for my grandchildren. I don't want money I didn't earn, even if technically my father earned it. But Mr. Bennett, Ivy's voice broke, I destroyed my family for this. I gave up everything so you could have justice, and you're just refusing it? I didn't ask you to destroy your family. You made that choice yourself. Maybe for good reasons, maybe not. But don't put that responsibility on me. Ivy felt tears burning her eyes. She'd been so certain, so sure that giving the Bennetts their due would somehow make everything right, would balance the scales, would transform tragedy into justice. But Michael Bennett didn't want that burden, didn't want to be part of the story anymore, wanted to leave the past buried where it belonged. At least talk to your children, Amanda urged. Let them decide. David and Rachel deserve to know they were robbed. They deserve the choice. Michael considered this. Fine, I'll tell them. I'll show them the evidence. But I'm not encouraging them to sue. I'm going to tell them what I believe, that some injustices can't be fixed by money, that some wounds are better left alone. They left Michael Bennett's house in defeated silence. In the rental car, Ivy put her head in her hands. I didn't expect that. I thought he'd want justice. He does want justice, Marcus said. He just defines it differently than you do. For him, justice isn't money. It's peace. It's not letting the past corrupt the present. But they've struggled unnecessarily for 3 generations. The Harrisons have everything while the Bennetts have nothing. That's not right. No, it's not. But Michael Bennett gets to decide what happens next. That's what agency means. You gave him the truth and the opportunity. What he does with it is up to him. They flew back home. Ivy moved into a small apartment, having given up the nice place her trust fund had been paying for. She quit her museum job. It felt wrong to work somewhere prestigious when she'd just denounced her family's ill-gotten wealth. She found work at a community center, teaching art to underprivileged kids. The pay was terrible, but the work felt honest, felt like something she could do without guilt. Her family had indeed disowned her. Robert had sent a formal letter informing her she was no longer a Harrison. Her trust fund was dissolved, her name removed from family documents, her belongings from her childhood home boxed up and delivered to her apartment. Andrew sent a single text. Hope destroying the family was worth it. Don't ever contact me again. Her mother sent nothing. The silence hurt more than Andrew's anger, but Julia checked in regularly. Most of the family thinks you're insane, but some of us understand why you did it, even if we couldn't have done it ourselves. Does that make me noble or stupid? Maybe both. If this story moved you, if you understand that doing the right thing doesn't always end the way we hope, please share it. Like this video. Comment with your thoughts about justice, restitution, and the complex reality of making amends for historical wrongs. Because sometimes the hardest part of pursuing justice is accepting that the people you're trying to help might not want what you're offering. 3 months after meeting Michael Bennett, Ivy received a phone call. It was David Bennett, Michael's son. Miss Harrison, my father gave me your number. I'd like to meet with you. They met at the same coffee shop where Ivy had first talked to Marcus. David was 38, with his grandfather's sharp eyes and a social worker's careful empathy. He sat across from Ivy with a folder of his own. My father told me everything, showed me the evidence, explained what you did, how you exposed your family, gave up your inheritance, all of it. I did what I had to do. Maybe. But my father doesn't want to pursue this, doesn't want the money or the acknowledgement or any of it. He's made peace with the past. I know. He told me. But I haven't made peace with it. David opened his folder. Inside were financial records. My sister Rachel and I have been talking. We're not like our father. We haven't had the luxury of making peace with poverty. We've struggled our entire lives. Rachel's clinic is underwater financially. She works 80-hour weeks trying to serve a community that can't afford healthcare. I've got student loans I'll be paying off until I'm 60. My niece can't afford college. So you want to sue? We want what's fair, not the whole fortune. We're not greedy, but enough to make our lives better, enough to let Rachel's clinic serve more patients, enough to send my niece to school, enough to acknowledge that Thomas Bennett existed and mattered and deserved better. Ivy felt hope stirring for the first time in months. Your father won't be happy. My father is 78 years old. He grew up in a different time with different values. He believes in suffering nobly. Rachel and I believe in fighting for what's right. We're not going to let false nobility keep us poor when there's a real opportunity for change. What are you proposing? David slid a document across the table. We've consulted with lawyers. We're willing to settle outside of court. We want $200 million, which is less than we'd probably win in a lawsuit. We want public acknowledgement that Thomas Bennett invented the valve system, and we want Harrison Industries to establish an engineering scholarship in Thomas Bennett's name. That's more than fair, that's generous. We're not trying to destroy your family, we're trying to get what's ours. If the Harrisons cooperate, this can be done quietly. If they fight, we'll go public and pursue everything we're legally entitled to. My family will fight. They've already hired lawyers to discredit the evidence. Then we'll fight back. We've got Amanda Rodriguez representing us. She's confident we'll win. Ivy felt something settle in her chest. Purpose. Direction. Validation that her choice hadn't been for nothing. How can I help? Testify. When this goes to trial, and it will go to trial because your family won't settle, we need you to explain how you found the evidence, to authenticate your grandmother's confession, to show that even the Harrisons themselves knew the fortune was stolen. They'll hate me even more. They already hate you. What's a little more? David was right. Ivy had already paid the price. Might as well see it through to the end. The lawsuit was filed 2 months later. Bennett v. Harrison Industries. The case made national news. Family fortune built on theft, the headlines read. Inventors' heirs sue for decades of lost profits. The Harrison family issued a statement denying everything. Called Eleanor's confession the ramblings of a senile old woman. Claimed the evidence was fabricated. Painted Ivy as a mentally unstable woman with a grudge against her family. Ivy testified anyway. Explained how she'd found the letter. Authenticated the evidence, described Eleanor's confession in her own words. The judge found her credible. The jury found her sympathetic. Harrison Industries tried to settle halfway through the trial, offered $50 million to make it go away quietly. David and Rachel refused. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about truth, about acknowledgement, about restoring Thomas Bennett's legacy. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Expert witnesses testified about the valve system's origins. Handwriting analysts confirmed Thomas Bennett's design drawings predated James Harrison's patent. Financial experts calculated decades of lost profits. In the end, the jury sided with the Bennetts, awarded them $175 million in damages, ordered Harrison Industries to publicly acknowledge Thomas Bennett as the true inventor, required the establishment of the Thomas Bennett Engineering Scholarship Fund. The Harrison family was devastated. Robert had to sell assets to pay the settlement. The family fortune was cut by more than half. Harrison Industries' stock plummeted. The family name, once synonymous with innovation and success, became associated with theft and fraud. Robert gave one interview after the verdict. When asked about his daughter, he said, "I have no daughter. Ivy Harrison is dead to me." But Ivy wasn't dead. She was more alive than she'd ever been. She'd lost her family, her inheritance, her comfortable life, but she'd gained something more valuable, the ability to look at herself in the mirror, the freedom from guilt, the knowledge that she'd done the hard, right thing, even when it cost her everything. David and Rachel Bennett used their settlement to transform their lives. Rachel expanded her clinic, making it a world-class community health center that served thousands. David paid off his debts and started a foundation helping at-risk youth. His niece went to MIT on the Thomas Bennett Scholarship, the first of hundreds of students who would benefit from the fund. Michael Bennett never spoke to his children about the lawsuit, maintained his position that they'd made a mistake. But when Rachel's clinic opened its new wing, he was there. When David's foundation held its first gala, he attended. He didn't approve of the money, but he loved his children. Sometimes that had to be enough. A year after the trial, Ivy received a letter from Thomas Bennett's daughter Sarah, who died before the lawsuit. Her own daughter had written it. "My mother passed away before she could know that her father's name was finally cleared. But I wanted you to know." She talked about Thomas Bennett all her life, about how brilliant he was, how betrayed he felt, how he never recovered from what James Harrison did to him. She died believing the injustice would never be acknowledged. You changed that. You gave my family something we thought was lost forever, the truth. Thank you. Ivy kept that letter in her apartment, looked at it when she doubted herself, when she wondered if destroying her family had been worth it, when she missed her brother or her mother or the life she'd left behind. The letter reminded her why she'd done it. Not for money, not for revenge, but for truth, for justice, for the radical idea that some things mattered more than comfort. Eleanor Harrison had lived 70 years with guilt, had carried the weight of complicity until it nearly crushed her, had died hoping someone else would be brave enough to do what she couldn't. Ivy had been that person, had chosen truth over comfort, had sacrificed everything to make partial restitution for a historical wrong. Was it enough? No. Nothing could truly compensate the Bennetts for 3 generations of struggle. Nothing could restore the years Thomas Bennett had lost or undo his bitter death. Nothing could erase the harm, but it was something. It was acknowledgement. It was justice, however incomplete. It was the best that could be done 70 years too late. Ivy never reconciled with most of her family. Robert died 5 years later without speaking to her again. Andrew maintained his silence. Her mother sent one letter near the end of her life. I don't understand why you did it, but I'm proud of you anyway. I wish I could tell you that. Mom. It was the closest thing to forgiveness Ivy would get, but she had Julia and Marcus, and eventually David and Rachel Bennett, who became her friends. People who understood that doing the right thing often meant losing everything, that justice wasn't clean or easy or painless, that sometimes the cost of conscience was total. On the 10th anniversary of finding Eleanor's letter, Ivy visited Thomas Bennett's grave. It was in a modest cemetery in Cleveland, the headstone simple and weathered. Someone had left fresh flowers, probably Rachel or one of Thomas's grandchildren. Ivy knelt in the grass and placed her own flowers beside the others. I'm sorry it took 70 years, she said to the name carved in stone. I'm sorry you never got to see your invention acknowledged. I'm sorry James Harrison stole from you. I'm sorry my family benefited while yours suffered. I'm sorry for all of it. The wind rustled through the trees. Ivy imagined it was Thomas Bennett's response. An acknowledgement, a release, permission to move forward. She stood and looked at the other graves nearby. Ordinary people who'd lived ordinary lives. People who'd worked hard and loved their families and died without fanfare. People who'd never built empires or accumulated fortunes or left legacies that lasted generations. People who'd lived honestly, who'd earned what they had, who'd died with clear consciences. Maybe that was the real fortune, not wealth or status or family legacy, but the ability to live with yourself, to make hard choices and accept their consequences, to choose truth even when lies would be easier. Ivy had made that choice, had given up everything her family had built over 3 generations, had destroyed her own comfortable life to restore a fraction of justice. Was it worth it? She thought about Eleanor's letter, about the weight of 70 years of guilt, about dying with unbearable secrets, about passing that burden to someone else because you couldn't bear it alone. She thought about Thomas Bennett, dying bitter and poor, about his children struggling unnecessarily, about his grandchildren working multiple jobs while the Harrisons lived in luxury. She thought about Rachel's clinic, now serving thousands, about David's foundation, changing lives, about the Thomas Bennett Scholarship, sending deserving students to engineering school. She thought about being able to look in the mirror without flinching, about sleeping without nightmares, about building a life on truth instead of lies. Yes, it was worth it. The Harrison family fortune had come from betrayal, had been built on theft and maintained by silence, had corrupted 3 generations with wealth they didn't deserve. Ivy had broken that cycle, had chosen differently, had proven that even people born into privilege could reject it when they understood its cost. The price had been everything, her family, her inheritance, her comfortable life, but she'd kept her conscience, and in the end, that was the only fortune that really mattered. She walked away from Thomas Bennett's grave lighter than she'd arrived. The weight Eleanor had carried for 70 years was finally gone, transformed into something else. Not quite redemption. The harm was too great for that. But acknowledgement, restitution, truth, it would have to be enough.